The day I discovered Richard's affair was like any other, until it wasn't. I, Anna, 32, always considered myself observant, but that day my skills were put to a test I never anticipated. Returning home early from work, I was met with a sight that froze me in my tracks. The garage shutter, always firmly closed, was ajar. Puzzled, I approached cautiously, my heart pounding an erratic rhythm against my chest. Peering inside, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. There, in the midst of our garage, was Richard's prized vintage sports car, and in it, entangled in a passionate embrace, were Richard and a woman I didn't recognize. The audacity of it, in our shared space, was a slap across my face. I stifled a gasp, biting my lip till it hurt. They couldn't know I was there. I needed evidence, something concrete. My mind raced as I struggled to think straight amidst the turmoil of betrayal. Then, as if fate played its hand, Richard's voice cut through the silence. "Come on, the car's too cramped. Let's do it outside next time, right?" His tone, light and carefree, was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. It was the voice of a man without a care in the world, a man who didn't deserve the loyalty I had given him. I had to act. Moving silently, I grabbed a few of Richard's clothes strewn on the floor and snatched the garage remote control. My hands trembled, but my resolve was firm. I pressed the button and the shutter began its slow descent. "You too? So ardently engaged like monkeys. Deserve to be left just as you are, with nothing on, fitting for your behavior," I whispered to myself, a bitter taste in my mouth. I left the garage, closing them in their disgrace. I couldn't bear to stay a moment longer. The evidence in my hand was my ticket to freedom from this sham of a marriage. I had always known that Richard had a penchant for theatrics, but this was a new low. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the disrespect, the utter disregard for our marriage vows. As I walked away, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but above all, a burning desire for retribution. Richard had made his bed, and now he was going to lie in it. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of his downfall. I was going to make sure of that. In the quiet of my office the next day, my mind incessantly replayed the previous night's events. Every casual smile and tender word from Richard now seemed like a carefully crafted performance. How long had I been living in this facade? I sat there, looking at the desktop background, a photo of us on our wedding day. It felt like looking at two strangers. I deleted it with a click, a small but liberating act. The memories of our life together took on a different hue now. Richard, with his charming smile and words, had always been particular about appearances. Our home, an aging yet elegant house, was chosen by him for its character, he had said. But now I saw it for what it was, a stage for his performance. I recalled the day he brought home that vintage sports car, a purchase that came out of nowhere. "It's a man's dream," he had proclaimed. That car, which cost more than a small house, was his pride and joy. Now, it was nothing more than a symbol of his vanity and deceit. As my professional facade held up at work, my personal life crumbled. I was a successful marketing director, known for my sharp strategies and keen insights. But at that moment, I felt like a fool. Fooled by a man I trusted with my heart. The memory of an encounter with Richard at a corporate event a few months ago resurfaced. He was the center of attention, laughing and socializing with his usual flair. I had seen him exchange numbers with a young woman, but he had brushed it off as a business contact. How naive I had been. The day wore on, and every interaction felt like a chore. My colleague Mark noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, Anna?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I forced a smile. "Just a long day," I replied, masking my turmoil. As I drove home, my thoughts were interrupted by a call from Richard. His voice, once comforting, now grated on my nerves. "Hey, love, running late tonight. Don't wait up," he said casually. "Sure," I replied, my voice steady. I wasn't going to confront him yet. I needed a plan, something that would hit him where it hurt the most, his ego and his wallet. That night, alone in our bed, I made a decision. Richard's betrayal wasn't just going to be the end of our marriage. It was going to be the start of his undoing. I was going to dismantle the life he so carefully built, piece by piece. Sitting in the dim light of my living room that evening, I initiated the plan I had been meticulously crafting. The laptop on my knees displayed the login screen to our home security system, a system Richard had installed for the safety of his precious car. Logging in, I navigated to the garage camera footage. My heart raced as I hit play, watching the scene unfold with a cold detachment. There they were, Richard and that woman, Lily, entangled in their sordid affair. The footage was damning, undeniable evidence of his betrayal. I downloaded the video, a digital weapon in my arsenal for the impending legal battle. Richard's reputation, his precious image, was about to be shattered. The next day at work, I was a shell of my usual self, my mind constantly on the impending confrontation. Mark approached my desk with a hesitant step. "Anna, you've been off. Anything I can do?" I shook my head, forcing a half smile. "Just a tough project. Thanks, though." As the day dragged on, my resolve only strengthened. Richard was not going to get away with this unscathed. That evening, Richard returned home with his usual carefree demeanor. "Hey, babe, I picked up Chinese for dinner. Thought you'd like a break from cooking." His words, once sweet, now felt like poison. I sat down at the dining table, my expression unreadable. "We need to talk, Richard." He paused, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Everything okay?" I pushed my laptop across the table, the video queued up. "Why don't you tell me?" Richard's face paled as the video played. His eyes darted from the screen to my face, searching for some sign of forgiveness. "Anna, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his usual eloquence gone. I leaned back, my voice calm but laced with venom. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, Richard, you cheating on me, in our own home." Richard scrambled for words, his mask crumbling. "It was a mistake. I love you, Anna. We can work through this." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Work through this? There's nothing left to work through. I want a divorce, Richard, and I want you to suffer for what you've done." His face contorted in a mix of anger and panic. "You can't do this to me. Think about our reputation, our social standing. That's all you care about, isn't it? Your precious reputation. Well, it's about to come crashing down." I stood up, my decision final. "I'll be contacting my lawyer in the morning. I suggest you do the same." Richard sat there, a defeated man, as I walked away. The web of lies he had woven was unraveling, and I was going to make sure it ensnared him in the end. In the days that followed, my home felt like a battleground, charged with silent tension and unspoken words. Richard tried to regain control, alternating between desperate pleas and veiled threats. But I was unmoved, my resolve as firm as steel. At work, I maintained my professional facade, but the weight of the situation was a constant shadow. During a meeting, I found my thoughts drifting, only to be brought back by Mark's concerned voice. "Anna, you sure you're okay? You seem distracted." I brushed it off with a strained smile. "Just a lot on my mind. I'll be fine." But the truth was far from it. I was planning my next move, a move that would ensure Richard paid for his betrayal. The more he tried to sweet-talk his way out of the situation, the more resolute I became. One evening, as Richard returned from work, his usual mask of confidence was replaced by an air of defeat. He slumped into a chair, looking at me with weary eyes. "Anna, can't we talk about this? I know I messed up, but we can fix it." His words fell on deaf ears. I had heard enough of his lies. "There's nothing left to discuss, Richard. I've made up my mind." He leaned forward, desperation in his voice. "You're going to destroy everything we've built. Think about what people will say." "People? Is that all you care about? What about us, Richard? What about our marriage?" He fell silent, unable to answer. His concern for public image had always overshadowed our relationship. The next day, I sought solace with Mrs. Harper, my mentor and confidant. She listened intently as I poured out my heart. "You need a break from all this, Anna," she advised. "Why not take that international project? Get away for a while." The idea was appealing. A chance to escape the suffocating atmosphere at home and put some distance between Richard and me. I made the decision. I was going to take the project and use the opportunity to gather my strength for the impending legal battle. It was also a chance to rebuild myself away from the shadow of Richard's deceit. That evening, I informed Richard of my decision. His reaction was a mix of surprise and frustration. "You're leaving now? In the middle of all this?" "Yes, Richard. I need to focus on my career, something you clearly never respected." He watched helplessly as I packed my bags. For the first time, I saw a hint of fear in his eyes, fear of losing control, fear of facing the consequences alone. As I left for the airport, I felt a sense of freedom. The distance would give me perspective and strength. Richard's web of lies had been torn apart, and now it was time to rebuild my life on my terms. The international project was a breath of fresh air, a much-needed escape from the stifling situation back home. Immersed in work, I found a renewed sense of purpose and strength. Each successful meeting, every new connection, was a step towards reclaiming my independence. However, Richard's shadow loomed large, even miles away. His texts and calls, a mix of pleading and anger, were relentless. I responded only when necessary, keeping my replies brief and emotionless. One evening, after a particularly long day, my phone buzzed with yet another call from Richard. I hesitated but answered, bracing myself for another bout of emotional manipulation. "Anna, where are you? This is getting ridiculous. You can't just run away from our problems." Richard's voice was strained, a mix of frustration and desperation. I replied coolly, "I'm not running away, Richard. I'm focusing on my career, something I should have done a long time ago." "You're abandoning our marriage over one mistake. You're being unreasonable," he retorted. "A mistake? Richard, you betrayed our marriage. This isn't just a simple error you can sweep under the rug." His voice rose, tinged with anger. "You're destroying our life over your pride. Come back and we can sort this out. We'll go to therapy, do whatever it takes." I could almost see him, the charming man I married, trying to weave his web of lies again. But that man was long gone, replaced by the reality of who he truly was. "Therapy won't fix what you broke, Richard. I'm filing for divorce. It's over." There was a moment of silence, and then his voice, now colder. "You'll regret this, Anna. You're making a huge mistake." I ended the call, a sense of finality washing over me. It was clear now. There was no salvaging what was left. Richard was only concerned about his image, his comfort. He didn't truly care about us or our marriage. Back in my hotel room, I looked out at the city lights, reflecting on the path ahead. The divorce would be messy, no doubt. Richard would fight it, perhaps out of spite or fear of losing his public persona. But I was ready for it. I had gathered enough evidence, and with my career thriving, I was financially secure. As the days passed, I grew more determined. Richard's attempts to reach out became more infrequent, his messages a mix of self-pity and veiled threats, but they no longer affected me. I was moving forward, leaving the shadow of our failed marriage behind. Upon my return, the reality of my crumbling marriage hit me like a tidal wave. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now felt like a prison of memories best forgotten. I moved into a modest apartment, a space that was mine alone, free from Richard's deceitful presence. The day of our final confrontation arrived sooner than I expected. Richard, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him, had requested to meet under the guise of discussing the terms of our divorce. As I sat across from him in the sterile environment of a lawyer's office, I felt a surge of power. This was my territory, my rules. Richard started with his usual charm, but there was a hint of desperation in his voice. "Anna, can't we settle this amicably? Think about the years we spent together." His words were like echoes from a past life. "Amicable? After what you've done? You must be joking," I replied, my voice steady. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, then leaned forward. "What do you want, Anna? Money? The house? Just name it." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I want justice, Richard. You don't get to buy your way out of this." His facade cracked, revealing the selfish man I had come to know. "You're ruining my life over this. I hope you're happy." "Happy? No, Richard, but I will have peace knowing you can't hurt me anymore." The negotiation was tense, with Richard trying to manipulate every term in his favor, but I stood my ground, backed by solid evidence and a resolute legal team. As we neared the end of the meeting, Richard's demeanor changed. He was no longer the confident man I had married. Instead, he was a man cornered by his own actions, lashing out in a futile attempt to regain control. "This is a mistake, Anna. You'll regret this," he hissed, his eyes dark with anger. "I already regret many things, Richard. Letting you control my life for so long is one of them. This divorce is not a mistake. It's a correction." With the final papers signed, I walked out of the office feeling lighter than I had in years. The chains of our toxic marriage were finally broken. Richard had lost more than just a wife. He had lost the respect of his peers, the facade of the perfect husband, and soon he would face the full consequences of his actions in the eyes of the law and society. I had not only survived Richard's betrayal, but emerged stronger, more determined. The chapter of my life that included him was closed, and a new, promising chapter was waiting to be written. The months following the divorce were a whirlwind. I had successfully navigated the legal labyrinth, emerging victorious but not unscathed. The divorce was more than just a legal separation. It was a reclaiming of my identity, my independence. In my new apartment, each morning brought a sense of renewal. I relished the freedom, the quiet, and the space to think and plan my future. My career, which had always been a source of pride, now became my focus. I dove into my work with a renewed vigor, finding solace in my achievements. News of Richard's downfall spread like wildfire. His reputation, once his most prized possession, was now tarnished. His professional life suffered as clients and colleagues distanced themselves. The man who had thrived on control and appearances was now struggling to keep his world from crumbling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had sold the vintage sports car, a symbol of his vanity, to cover legal expenses. It was a poetic end to the object that had once been a catalyst for our downfall. One evening, as I sat sipping coffee in my living room, I reflected on the journey. The pain, the betrayal, and the fight had transformed me. I was no longer the woman who had naively believed in Richard's lies. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined. A call from Mrs. Harper, who had been my rock throughout the ordeal, interrupted my thoughts. "Anna, how are you holding up?" "Better than ever," I replied, a genuine smile on my face. "That's wonderful to hear. You know, there's an opening for a senior position in the company's overseas branch. I think you'd be perfect for it." The offer took me by surprise. It was an opportunity I had always dreamed of but never pursued, held back by the confines of my marriage. I don't know what to say, Mrs. Harper. It's a big step. "A step you're more than ready for, Anna. You've proven your strength and resilience. It's time to take on the world." I let the words sink in. This was more than just a job offer. It was a chance to start anew, to build a life on my terms, free from the shadows of the past. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "It's time for a new adventure." As I ended the call, I looked around my apartment, a space that had become my sanctuary. It was time to leave it behind, to embark on a new journey. Richard's betrayal had shattered my world, but in its place I had built something stronger, something truly my own. As I packed my bags for the move, I felt a sense of excitement for the future, a future that was mine to shape. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. I froze in the hallway, hands trembling, as the conversation in the living room pierced my ears. "We need a new wife for Mitchell who can give us a grandson to carry on the family name," Franklin's gruff voice resonated. "That Adrienne is a failure. 15 years and she couldn't produce a male heir." My heart pounded, breath growing shallow. This couldn't be happening. "I agree," Louise chimed in, her tone laced with disdain. "It's time we found Mitchell a younger, more fertile replacement." Mitchell remained silent, his lack of objection a deafening betrayal. I clutched the wall for support, fighting the urge to burst through the door. How could the man I loved, the man whose family I had sacrificed everything for, be so complicit in this vile scheme? "Perhaps a woman from a respectable family this time," Franklin continued, driving the knife deeper. "Not some inexperienced nobody like Adrienne." Tears stung my eyes as their venomous insults lacerated my soul. All the belittling, the years of walking on eggshells in my own home, it had led to this. My disposal like a worn piece of furniture. The room fell silent. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't discover me eavesdropping. Footsteps approached, and I scrambled back towards the stairs, my heart in my throat. As I reached the top step, Ella appeared at the end of the hallway. "Mom, is everything okay?" I startled, her voice shattering my frantic haze. My beautiful, innocent daughter, would she become another casualty of this family's ruthless ambition? "Everything's fine, sweetie," I lied, forcing a smile as I pulled her into an embrace. "Just got a little dizzy, that's all." As I stroked her hair, my mind whirled. This couldn't go on any longer. Enough was enough. Those vicious snakes downstairs had awoken a protective fury within me, one that would stop at nothing to shelter my daughter from their toxicity. We had sacrificed too much already. My once blossoming career, laid to waste years ago when Mitchell insisted I be a stay-at-home wife to appease his controlling parents. All the demeaning comments, the constant dismissal of my role in this household, I had endured it for Ella's sake, hoping to preserve some semblance of family. But now they sought to tear us apart, to discard me and destroy the life I had desperately clung to. Not anymore. Those delusional fools had ignited an unquenchable fire within me. I would burn their twisted legacy to the ground. Sleep evaded me that night, as the venomous words replayed in my mind like a broken record. I tossed and turned, haunted by the prospect of being torn from my own family by those deceitful vipers downstairs. Mitchell remained oblivious, snoring beside me as if his parents hadn't just signed my death warrant. How could he be so blind, so resigned to their manipulative ways? The memories came flooding back, the demoralizing comments about my inability to birth a son, the snide remarks diminishing my role as a wife and mother. All along, it had been building towards this sick ultimatum. As dawn broke, I rose quietly, my restless mind swirling with anger and determination. Peering into Ella's room, I watched her sleep peacefully, her face a vision of tranquil innocence. She deserved so much better than this twisted farce of a family. Descending the stairs, I braced myself for the onslaught that would come. Franklin and Louise were already seated at the breakfast table, their expressions stern as gunshots. Well, if it isn't our useless daughter-in-law," Franklin sneered as I entered. "Did you finally come to your senses about providing us with a real heir?" My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms. "How dare you treat me with such disrespect in my own home?" Louise scoffed. "This is our home, you ungrateful fool, and you'll soon learn your place when Mitchell finds himself a new wife." The audacity of her words ignited my fury. "Over my dead body, I've sacrificed everything for this family, subjecting myself to your demeaning insults and archaic expectations." "Expectations you failed to meet," Franklin countered, his eyes narrowing to callous slits. 15 years without a grandson. You're the failure here, not us." I recoiled as if struck, their cruelty seeming to manifest as physical blows against my psyche. Mitchell entered, his brow furrowed. "What's with all the yelling?" "Your precious wife has finally found her voice," Louise spat. "Pity she didn't put that fire into producing an heir." Mitchell's gaze fell, his jaw tensing but no words escaping his lips. My heart sank. He wouldn't defend me, not against his poisonous parents. In that moment, any remnant of love I felt withered on the vine. This marriage, this family, it was all a lie perpetuated by heartless tyrants obsessed with legacy over humanity. But I wouldn't go down without a fight. If they thought they could bully me into quiet submission, they were gravely mistaken. Stealing my nerves, I met Franklin's menacing glare with unwavering defiance. "You want a new woman for your spawn? You'll have to kill me first, because I'll burn this whole damn facade to the ground before letting you inflict your soulless dominance over me or my daughter." Their stunned silence spoke volumes. They had awoken a vengeful spirit they couldn't tame. Let the games begin. In the aftermath of my defiant outburst, a tense silence blanketed the house. Franklin and Louise avoided me like the plague, scowling whenever our paths crossed. Mitchell remained his typical apathetic self, seemingly oblivious to the war brewing under his own roof. My sole solace came from Ella, whose bright spirit served as a beacon during those turbulent days. But even she couldn't the darkness creeping into her eyes, the byproduct of this family's endless toxicity. "Mom, why do Grandpa and Grandma always treat you like that?" she asked one afternoon as we prepared dinner. I froze, uncertain how to respond without shattering her innocence. "They're just set in their ways, honey. Old-fashioned thinking." Her brow furrowed. "But the way they talk to you, it's not right." Sliding the casserole into the oven, I pulled her into a tight embrace, my heart aching at her precocious awareness. She deserved so much better than this poisonous environment. A knock at the door interrupted our moment. I answered to find Leo, one of the graphic designers from my former workplace, standing on the doorstep. "Leo, what are you doing here?" "I tried calling, but you didn't answer," he said, wringing his hands nervously. "I have some things I need to tell you, in private." Something in his tone hinted at its importance. "Of course, come in." As we settled in the living room, Leo's usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by a somber frown. "Adrian, I don't know how to say this." My heart raced, fearing the worst. "What is it?" He exhaled deeply. "It's about Mitchell's family business. There are rumors circulating about illegal practices, tax evasion, shady dealings, you name it. I wanted to give you a heads up." The air left my lungs in a forceful gust. Of course, why was I even surprised at this point? Franklin's obsession with legacy must have clouded any semblance of ethics or morality. "Are you sure about this?" I pressed. An idea sparked in my mind, a possible path to freedom from this wretched family's clutches. Leo nodded solemnly. "I've heard it from multiple sources. Just be careful, Adrienne. These aren't the type of people you want to cross." As if on cue, Franklin's booming voice echoed through the hall. "Who are you talking to, you insolent?" He stopped short at the sight of Leo, his expression contorting into a mask of fury and trepidation. In that fleeting moment, I glimpsed the panic in the old bastard's eyes. He knew, and he knew that I knew. No longer would we cower under the weight of their contemptible actions. Armed with this newfound knowledge, the shackles began to loosen. "Everything okay, Adrienne?" Leo's concerned voice shattered the tension. I met Franklin's widening glare with a subtle smirk. "Everything's just fine. In fact, it's better than it's been in a long time." The game was afoot, the first counterattack in my quest to dismantle their toxic empire. Justice would be served, by any means necessary. Franklin and Louise descended upon me like a pack of rabid wolves the following day. Their faces were twisted into snarling masks of rage, eyes burning with unbridled fury. "Who was that man in our home yesterday?" Franklin spat, slamming his fist on the kitchen counter. "Bringing strange men around without our permission?" Louise crowded me against the refrigerator, her thin lips curled into a sneer. "Trying to find a replacement for our pathetic son already? You conniving little—" "That's enough!" I silenced her tirade, squaring my shoulders in defiance. "That strange man is a former colleague. Unlike you two, he actually treats me with basic human decency." Franklin's eyes narrowed to predatory slits. "Watch your tone, girl. This is still our house." "For now," I muttered under my breath, just loud enough for his ears to prick up. Before he could respond, Mitchell's oblivious voice rang out from the living room. "Mom, Dad, are we still going to Aunt Kathy's party tonight?" As if a switch had flipped, Franklin and Louise's faces melted into grandfatherly masks of benevolence. "Of course, son," Franklin called out jovially. "We'll be right there." With one final scathing glare in my direction, they disappeared down the hallway, their sickening charade already in full swing. I doubled over, hands bracing against the counter as I struggled to catch my breath. This incessant gaslighting and emotional whiplash left me constantly on edge, my defenses forever raised. The party that evening was a waking nightmare. Kathy's lavish home was filled with Franklin and Louise's elitist cohorts, their fake smiles and vapid conversations sapping my will to exist. Mitchell reveled in the attention, basking in his family's twisted vision of success. As the evening descended into drunken revelry, Franklin seized the moment to lay into me once more. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" he bellowed, silencing the gathered guests. "Here it comes, the public debasement he seemed to relish dishing out. I'd like to make a toast," he continued, swirling his glass of scotch, "to my wonderful family, the backbone that has allowed our business to thrive all these years." Obediently, Mitchell and Kathy's family raised their glasses in celebration. My stomach turned at the sycophantic display. "And a special toast." Franklin leveled his reptilian glare at me, a sinister grin creeping across his face. "To my dear daughter-in-law, Adrienne, who has graced us with her boundless love and support for over 15 blessed years." The jeers and chuckles erupted immediately, raucous laughter echoing through the opulent hall. I fought back hot tears, my cheeks burning crimson with humiliation as all eyes bored into me. "What's the matter, dear?" Louise sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "No son to help carry on the family legacy?" That was it, the final indignity I could withstand. A familiar fire erupted in my soul, scorching away any remaining chains that once bound me to this abusive fiasco. I locked eyes with Franklin, my gaze hardening into steel-forged resolution. "You'll get your heir, Franklin. One way or another." His smug smirk faltered ever so slightly at my ominous words. The game was evolving now, the gloves coming off in this nightmarish battle of wills. There would be no more hollow compromises or feeble acquiescence. The avenging flame had been lit. In the wake of that disastrous party, a calm determination settled over me. No more would I cower under Franklin and Louise's twisted reign of terror. The path forward was clear. I would free myself and Ella from their poisonous clutches, no matter the cost. The first step required fortifying my defenses. I reached out to Leo, confiding in him the full extent of the abuse and degradation I had endured over the years. To his credit, he didn't flinch or judge, he simply listened with a compassionate ear. "You can't keep living like this, Adrienne," he said after I had unloaded the full weight of my tortured story. "This kind of toxicity, it's soul-crushing." I nodded warily. "I know, but it's not just about me anymore. I need to get Ella away from their influence before it's too late." Leo leaned forward, his expression one of grim determination. "Then you have to get out. Both of you, clean break and start over somewhere new." The thought simultaneously exhilarated and terrified me. Could I really just uproot my entire life and flee from Mitchell's family? From the man I had once loved? But one glance at the photo of Ella on my dresser steeled my resolve. She was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing everything to liberate us both. "You're right," I said, meeting Leo's gaze with newfound conviction. "I've let them control me for far too long. It's time I took my life back." A subtle smile played across Leo's lips. "I might know someone who can help with that, if you're serious." My heart raced, though not with fear, with the thrilling embrace of taking that first defiant step. "I'm dead serious." Over the next few weeks, the plan took shape. Leo connected me with a contact who could provide new identities and credentials for me and Ella. A fresh start, far away from Franklin's poisonous empire. I also began diligently documenting every instance of their abhorrent behavior, recording conversations with a hidden device to preserve evidence of their threats and mistreatment. The pieces were falling into place. Of course, severing ties required money, my own savings having long been drained, financing their lavish lifestyle. So I did what any reasonable person would. I began systematically pillaging their household accounts, siphoning off enough to secure a new home and transition into this new life. It was a heady rush, chipping away at the foundation of their control with every covert transfer. With each withdrawal, I could taste the sweet liberation inching ever closer. The final puzzle piece fell into place when Leo approached me one afternoon, a modest grin adorning his face. "You'll never guess what just happened," he began, unable to contain his excitement. "One of the ad agencies I applied to, they want me, a senior design role in Denver." My eyes widened at the implication. Denver, over 1,000 miles away, far enough to escape this waking nightmare permanently. "Leo, that's incredible," I gushed, pulling him into an appreciative embrace. As we separated, his expression turned serious once more. "You know, they'd be insane not to want to bring you aboard, too. With your portfolio and experience?" I felt my heart swell with hope. "Are you saying?" A sly grin answered my unfinished query. "Let's just say your escape plan just got a hell of a lot more real." Giddy excitement bubbled within me. This was it. The rebirth I had dreamed of for years, but never imagined possible. The shackles of Franklin's tyranny were rusting away with each passing day. I was ready to breathe free again. The weeks flew by in a frenzied blur as Leo and I put the final pieces of our meticulously crafted escape into place. With each passing day, my heart raced with the tantalizing promise of imminent freedom from Franklin's toxic stranglehold. And yet, a part of me couldn't shake the nagging sense of obligation, the need to administer one final, righteous act of defiance before fleeing into the great unknown. It was during one of my covert recording sessions that the answer revealed itself. Franklin's very words providing the cosmic green light I had been seeking. "Told Henderson we'd have those shipments mislabeled and across the border by Friday," he grumbled to Louise in the study one evening. "That money launderer better hold up his end of the bargain this time." Money laundering and smuggling, the illegal dealings Leo had forewarned me about, now confirmed in high-definition audio quality. My chest tightened with perverse validation. This was it, the damning evidence that could bring their empire crumbling down around their rotten cores. Although delivering this recording to the authorities risked exposing my own culpability, the temptation to rain righteous fury upon their deceitful heads proved too delicious to resist. The day before our scheduled departure, with our falsified documents and new lives prepped for Denver, I decided to enact my parting salvo. As Mitchell and his simpering parents gathered to watch another mind-numbing sitcom rerun, I slipped the recording onto an unmarked disc and mailed it with an anonymous tip. My heart hammered as I sealed the envelope, half expecting Franklin to somehow sniff out my act of rebellion and retaliate. But the night passed like any other, filled with their meaningless droning and self-congratulatory posturing. Ella and I made our move the following morning, both of us dragging lightly packed luggage towards the awaiting taxi. Franklin and Louise were conveniently detained at some charity brunch, while Mitchell had already departed for the office. I steeled myself as I turned towards the home that had been my gilded prison for over a decade and a half, fighting back the urge to spit venom in its direction. Instead, I allowed the faintest hint of a smile to grace my lips as one fleeting thought carried me forward. Enjoy the reckoning, you bastards. The voyage to Denver passed in a dreamlike trance of giddy liberation. Gone were the weighted stares and snide remarks, replaced by the purifying vistas of a new frontier blurring past the taxi's windows. It was here, in a picturesque downtown loft that Leo had arranged for us, that the first reports began trickling in. Speculative mumblings online of Mitchell's family business being raided by federal agents. Allegations of fraud and financial improprieties. Each refresh of my burner phone's browser revealed further details of the proverbial House of Cards collapse. Overseas accounts seized, assets frozen, the entire rotten family in for questioning amidst a sordid firestorm of scandal. I absorbed it all with a heady mix of savage satisfaction and deeply rooted melancholy. As much as I had longed for this karmic reckoning, a small part of my heart ached for the good man Mitchell once was before becoming completely ensconced in his family's depravity. But that man was long dead now, replaced by a shell of obedient compliance. I had done what was necessary to save myself, and more importantly, to preserve Ella's innocence from their corruptive grasp. As the first traces of a Rocky Mountain sunset bled through our loft's picture windows, I felt Ella's small hand slipping into my own. Her warm smile was the reassuring balm I needed in that moment. "It's going to be okay now, isn't it, Mom?" I pulled her close, planting a tender kiss on her forehead as I committed to the words that would steer us forward into this new beginning. "Yes, my sweet girl. From now on, everything is going to be okay." The images flooded the news cycle in the days that followed. A disgraceful parade of perp walks and mugshots featuring Franklin, Louise, and their once illustrious family of criminal associates. Seeing those smug, condescending faces twisted into masks of abject humiliation filled me with a nauseating sense of gratification. The mighty patriarchs had fallen, brought low by the very greed and egomania that had fueled their toxic empire. They were finished, their hollow legacy cratering into a scorched pit of legal ruin and insolvency. A chapter of our lives that had once seemed inescapable was now drawing to a brutal, definitive close. My burner phone rang incessantly those first few weeks, Mitchell's number flashing across the screen like a deranged stalker. I never answered, of course. What could he possibly say to excuse his willing complicity in their depravity? To make amends for the years of emotional and psychological torment he enabled? No, the Mitchell I had loved was gone, forever sullied by an obsession with status and his family's perverse value system. He had made his bed, soiling the once pristine sheets with greed and moral bankruptcy. Now he could lie in it. The media fanfare surrounding the case was insatiable. Every tawdry detail, every allegation of financial chicanery splashed across the front pages in grandiose headlines: "Empire of Deceit, Family Business Revealed as Criminal Front." A part of me couldn't help but revel in the shameless rubbernecking. These were the very same high society elites who had once revered Franklin and his brood, suckling from the teat of their ill-gotten riches and high-minded heirs. Now those same sycophantic leeches were lining up for a front-row seat to this grotesque public lynching. Through it all, Ella remained my unshakable pillar of strength and clarity. While the news broadcasts recounted each sordid revelation with rabid indignation, her gentle hand would find mine, calming eyes reminding me of what truly mattered. We were free from their venomous clutches, the scourge of their poisonous influence exorcised by the brilliant light of justice. In time, even my own name would occasionally slip into the news cycle, comment sections speculating about the disillusioned wife who had finally had enough, who brought the whole rickety facade tumbling down. Each mention sparked a defiant fire within me, emboldening my sense of righteousness in the face of those who still sought to cast aspersions. They didn't see me as a victim who escaped, who reclaimed her autonomy by whatever means were available. No, in their privileged eyes I was simply another pariah to condemn, a filthy rat who had abandoned the sinking ship of family values and reputation maintenance. But I didn't need their hollow approval or shallow acceptance any longer. Those days of deference were buried, replaced by an awakened sense of purpose instilled by the mere act of perseverance. When the smoke finally cleared, our fractured little family would emerge from the rubble, hardened but victorious. And emerge we did, first in a modest two-bedroom flat near Leo's design firm, then slowly blossoming into an idyllic new life as the court-appointed restitution checks began to roll in. With each deposit, I could sense Ella's spirit elevating, her once dimmed sparkle reigniting in the warm glow of our freedom. We were more than survivors. We were the rising phoenix, scorched wings spreading wide to embrace a vibrant new reality far removed from that warped paradigm. No longer bound by poisonous pedigree or archaic patriarchal values, our truth finally unfurled for the world to witness. The apple never fell far from the tree after all. Sometimes they simply chose to forge a brand new orchard of their own making. The years melted away in a surreal blur of newfound tranquility and hard-earned growth. As Mitchell's family circus careened further into legal purgatory, Ella and I steadily rebuilt our lives from those traumatic rubble heaps. Denver proved to be the dream reboot we had so desperately craved, a world away from the suffocating toxicity of our former existence. Leo's design agency was a welcoming haven, the creative team treating me like a long-lost comrade rather than an outcast pariah. It was there, developing cutting-edge ad campaigns in a nurturing environment, that I finally rediscovered the spark that had set my soul afire all those years ago. The passion, the drive, the addictive thrill of visual storytelling, it all came roaring back with amplified intensity. While I thrived professionally, Ella's own transformation left me in awestruck admiration. The once shy, withdrawn young girl had blossomed into a confident, brilliant young woman, top of her class and already fielding inquiries from elite universities across the country. Our cozy two-bedroom flat, a humble refuge in those shaky early days, steadily gave way to an airy downtown loft, teeming with contemporary furnishings and Ella's vibrant artwork adorning the exposed brick walls. A canvas of her own reinvention, a physical manifestation of how far we had come. Holidays and special occasions, once tainted by Franklin's looming specter of scorn, became cherished celebrations sans judgment or archaic expectations. Blissfully ordinary rituals like baking pies for Thanksgiving or stringing up twinkling lights for Christmas filled our beings with joy rather than dread. At last we were beholden only to our own values, our own visions of what constituted a life well lived. No more pandering to hollow ideals or self-righteous blowhards obsessed with appearances over human dignity. Of course, the legal maelstrom endured like a nagging pop-up ad you could never quite close. Depositions and court dates, investment account audits, and impassioned victim statements. It seemed there was no end to the punitive wrangling over Mitchell's family's illegally acquired holdings and business entities. Through it all, I steadfastly refused to let the toxicity seep back into our reclaimed serenity. Gone were the days of bending to their antiquated will, of allowing them to extort my happiness and autonomy. Ella was my singularly empowering force now, her dazzling smile and academic accolades the only lingering proof I required of our profound metamorphosis. Then came the day I'll never forget. Ella's high school graduation party in our open-air loft, surrounded by Leo and her beaming new social circle of creatives and young progressives. A joyous kaleidoscope of positive energy in sharp contrast to the grotesque farce of that Aunt Kathy gala years prior. I watched my daughter mingle and exude self-assured warmth with a surreal sense of catharsis and validation. This beaming aura of confidence and freedom, with not a trace of familial anguish to restrain her effervescent spirit, it was more than I could have ever dreamed for her. In that moment, as the celebratory chatter echoed through our vibrant living space, I finally exhaled the last lingering twinges of psychological shrapnel. The looking glass had rematerialized into a shining reflection of succor and empowered rebirth, our journey from subjugation to self-actualization solidifying into an unblemished truth. Those reconstructive years had molded us into modern warriors, philosophers of the human condition emerging from the fires of domestic purgatory, tempered by the flames, yet nor vindicated by the righteous path we had chosen to carve through the shadows of oppression. And as Ella embraced me with glistening eyes and a radiant smile, I knew our next chapter was only just beginning to unfurl its magnificent wings.